Let me introduce you to one of the greatest books written in physics. The title of the book is called as Principles of Optics, written by Max Born and Emil Wolf. So before I really go into the details of this particular book, let me give you some overview of the authors who were behind this magnificent book. The first person whom I'm going to talk a little bit more and quite a bit is none other than Max Born. I assume all of you are aware of Max Born. He was one of the greatest physicists who played a very critical role in bringing out the interpretation of wave function in quantum mechanics. In fact, his contribution was so important that he ended up winning a Nobel Prize in 1954 for the interpretation of quantum mechanics. By the way, he was also a great mentor of many more greats, including Heisenberg, Enrico Fermi, Gerhard Herzberg, and so many other physicists who were growing up learning physics and quantum mechanics in 1920s and 30s, and he was their teacher and played a very significant role. Now, one of the important aspects of Max Born was the interpretation of the wave function, which is one of the very important concepts in quantum mechanics. The wave function, as you know, actually has a very important significance in understanding various different processes in quantum mechanics. The probability density, which is essentially the modulo square of this particular wave function, plays a critical role in the interpretation of the wave function itself. As you can see on the screen, the modulo psi square is the essential probability density of the wave function. So in this sense, the meaning of wave function comes into the fore as a modulo square, which is essentially the probability density, and therefore plays a critical role in understanding what it means to have a specific wave function and how it can be used in quantum mechanics. It also adds statistical meaning. That is the very important aspect related to this interpretation, and this interpretation was mainly given by Max Born. Einstein had his hand even in this particular case. Born mentions in his writing that Einstein actually had a very important contribution via his radiation formula, which he used to rederive Planck's radiation formula. And in there, Einstein utilizes a very important concept related to the transition probability. And it seems Max Born was motivated by this particular principle of transition probability and its density, which Einstein used, and he took that particular idea and also utilized it to interpret the wave function. This particular Einstein's formula also introduced the concept of the photon in the context of the interpretation and was one of the very important kind of epochs in physics, because it also led to so-called Bose-Einstein statistics in the later stage. Now let's come to the particular book, this magnificent book. What is the significance of Born and Wolf is the question we need to ask. One is that it is one of the kind of important books which has become a kind of a classic, and Principle of Optics, which is the title of this particular book, is usually called as Born and Wolf. It is mathematically rigorous book. It has some very important characteristics in postulating how to actually derive a lot of things in optics, right from geometrical optics all the way to electromagnetic waves. And importantly, it reinterprets the observations what you can have in laboratory in the context of aberration and the lens formula and all these phenomena which we would have studied in the conventional geometrical optics regime is now retransformed and interpreted using electromagnetic wave theory. That's one of the significant aspects of this particular book. One of the characteristic features of this book is also the conceptual discussion on imaging and diffraction. For example, most of the imaging and diffraction what you would have studied in undergraduate level or in sometimes even at postgraduate level would not have the rigorous Maxwell interpretation and Maxwell equation foundations for optics. In this particular book, that is the interpretation which is generally given. Among this particular discussion in the book, the chapter 13 of the book is very interesting. And in there, one of my favorite theory is the scattering theory, which actually has been extensively discussed in this particular book. There is also an important concept called as Born approximation, which probably would have been also a concept which is used in a different context, where this approximation leads to so-called optical theorem. Okay, and what is that? What is the concept behind this? It is a different video and a discussion altogether. But what is important here is that if you want to really understand the rigorous footing on which scattering theory is built, this is one of the go-to books. Of course, the reading might be a little bit tough, but if you have very strong electromagnetic theory background, this is a great book to really look up some of the further interpretations of electromagnetic wave theory applied to scattering problem. So much so that this also gives the lexicon and also the kind of interpretation for quantum mechanical scattering theory, which happen to be very important even in high energy physics and other kind of interpretations. So there is also a very interesting story related to this book and how it was written. This was essentially an extended edition of Max Born's famous book, which was written in German, which was titled as Optik. And they wanted to modernize this particular book and bring in some specific modern theory and also bring in the viewpoints of solid state physics and also some questions related to quantum mechanics and other things into the interpretation of this particular concept of optics. And this was also kind of an initiative where collaboration played a critical role. And in there is a very important person who really plays a critical role, and that person's name is Emil Wolf. Okay, Emil Wolf happens to be one of the great optical physicists, and he lived for a long duration up to the age of 95 or 96, and he wrote his last paper when he was around 95 or 96, and he was one of the kind of modern optics dada, so to speak, and played a very critical role in bringing electromagnetic theory to modern optics and photonics and various different principles. So there are so many interesting aspects related to Emil Wolf, and I would strongly urge you to have a look at some of his work. So Emil Wolf, in the preface of this particular book, talks about Born's working style. Born actually had a very strict daily routine for writing, and that's how a lot of things actually came into fore. And he also held collaborative meetings, and usually he used to ask all the young people, what have you done, whenever he actually interacted with the students in his group, including the postdocs. By the way, Emil Wolf was the postdoc of Max Born, and although there was a difference of 40 years between them, they actually combined to write this particular book. And he also used to have very intense scientific discussions with his collaborators and various different people with whom he was working. And interestingly, this book actually started as a collaborative project between various different people, but it was Emil Wolf who took over the major part of the writing. And you may ask, why is that so? Because initially this book was supposed to be written by Max Born and Gabor, and Gabor actually is one of the main person behind holography, who went on to win a Nobel Prize. But he withdrew from writing because his schedule became very, very tight, and he could not actually put time in writing this particular book. However, he did also look into this large project and contributed to a particular chapter in this particular book, especially on the electron optics. And therefore, Wolf took over from James Gabor, and there was also another author who was supposed to actually contribute to the book, but he also pulled out of the plan. And therefore, all the responsibility of writing this particular book was put on Emil Wolf, and he played a major role in writing this particular book. So there's a lot to learn from this aspect from what Emil Wolf says in the preface of the book. And it very nicely gives the way in which Born viewed physics, and that's something, there's an important lesson for all of us. Max Born, who played a very critical role in various different parts of physics, thought that all physics matters. It doesn't matter which is fashionable and which is not. And he told his subordinates and students to go beyond fashion. And he always emphasized an important point, and that is there is no kind of specific aspect of physics which is more important and less important. The only difference is that there is good research and bad research. So this is the only way to kind of interpret work, and don't see them as this particular topic is more fashionable and this particular topic is not fashionable. And this is a very good kind of thinking process to take forward, because it tells us that the interesting problems and questions always come no matter what part of the physics or part of the science it actually originates. As long as you are interested in it and you are really putting time and effort to do this research, it will always have very important rewards to seek from. For more details, check out my blog, which I wrote a few years ago. There's a lot more of the discussion on this particular book. The link is in the description. Do have a look at that particular blog, which I wrote several years ago now, mainly talking about the interpretation of wave functions. I also talk extensively about Wolf's kind of thoughts on how Born worked, and there are some beautiful quotes, and there are many interesting things to learn from what both Born had to say about wave functions and what Wolf had to say about Max Born. So for all these details, do check out the blog, which is given in the description, and I hope you like this particular video. Thank you.